Hello, everybody, and welcome to This is Cohousing, the Cohousing podcast. I'm Charles Durrett, author and principal architect at the Cohousing Company, and I happen to coin the word cohousing. In today's episode, we're discussing a co-housing process about as elegant as they get. And so I'm happy that my guests are Carolyn Salmon and Jack Salmon, who were on board from the very beginning. And they did some really fantastic things for their process. I talk about all the time when the process is great, the co-housing is great. Not only have I designed a half a dozen senior co-housing, but I've just happened to be designing three at the same time that I was working on Quimper Village. So it was an interesting contrast between the most functional, which was Quimper Village, and the least functional in terms of how hard it was to get a project built. Quimper Village is 28 units near the top of the Olympic Peninsula in the great state of Washington. The project got started largely at a local Unitarian Universalist church by a woman named Pat Hoonhausen. She unfortunately is no longer with us. And I just want to give a hearty welcome to Carolyn and Jack, and thank you guys so much for joining me today. Would you guys mind terribly starting at the beginning of Quimper Village and talking about how that project got started?
Well, it got started with David Hundhausen's feet. It turned out that David was having neuropathy problems. His feet weren't working right, and they lived in a two-story house on a hillside that had big steps in front, and he was having more and more trouble negotiating those. So he and Pat decided that they needed to talk about what to do next because they clearly couldn't stay in the house. And Pat, like a puppy with a new sock, took off doing her research and found out that other people had thought about the problem but didn't have any solutions that she quite recognized at the moment. So she called a meeting. People announced it in the local Unitarian church, said anybody who's interested in this kind of a problem, come to a meeting. About 100 people showed up. And at that point, we took off and did study group one and built the place.
At that public meeting, she described her and David's dilemma. And then she asked people to break into different tables and describe their dilemma to each other, reiterate theirs on paper at the front of the auditorium until people stopped having unique points. She was really happily surprised how many other people recognized the idea that they had similar issues and they were motivated to move into a more supportive setting, which, in her view, senior co-housing was primary candidate for her and David to live in.
Our first session is about trying to overcome denial, and we didn't have a lot of problems with denial. There was practically everybody was in agreement that we had to do something for this kind of problem.
You know, that makes me think that the average IQ is pretty high in Port Townsend because that is normally the biggest issue. You know, "Oh, I'm 65. I'm not old enough yet to worry about this. Oh, I'm 70. I'm 75. I'm not old enough." That's serious denial.
We get told that by people who are 85 that they're not ready yet.
The reality is that Port Townsend is a retirement town.
Yeah. Right.
So people are here already know that they're moving into the latter stages of their lives and want to make the best of it. And that's why they moved to Port Townsend.
And as I recall, in the major lament in Quimper Village was I think we finished the project, the average age was 72 and a half, and everybody said, "We wish we'd have started a lot sooner," because they started having a different lifestyle right out of the gate.
That's true. And we were conscious that we needed to move fast, which is one reason why we got it done in 3 years. Our informal motto was about not buying green bananas. We knew we didn't have much time, but we wanted to get it done.
Because we wanted to have time to live here.
Yes.
Tell me about the study group one that you guys did. As I mentioned, I was working on 3 projects when we did Quimper Village. One of them had taken study group 1 once, that was in Oklahoma, and that worked out fine. One of them had taken it twice, which was you guys, and the 3rd group didn't take it at all. The third group, I will just say, was by far the most difficult group to work with, largely because they had one foot in the past and one foot in the future. And so they were always straddling two quests of consequence, and to the point that they couldn't, in my view, make decisions timely enough to move forward. And they did take a lot longer. They were at least 5 years. Could you guys describe the study group one at some level? Because both of you took it.
Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
yes, yes. Pat said that of the 50 or so people who came to a second meeting, that only about 20 could hold a useful conversation. And Carolyn and I were in that group. We moved rather quickly, partly because you were cracking a whip a little bit.
What you mean?
I wasn't in denial.
We all need that.
Suggesting that we keep moving. And we did. We went through, I think, in a couple of places, we did 2 sessions a week. And we moved through the building question rather quickly and went right on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it kept going.
In fact, I'm not even sure we had quite finished it when we actually put the money on the table, but if we hadn't finished it much earlier.
Yeah.
And I have to say, working with that group, it was so obvious to me over and over again that, they were conscious of the issues. I'm getting older. I'm lucky I'm getting older. Getting out of denial. And that's such a big deal, especially in America, where youth prevails. And thirdly, they were ready to be proactive. In fact, when we started the site design workshop, I felt like there was a certain chomping at the bit. Those evenings, those evenings of moving the blocks around. It was a record number of solutions you guys came up with. Never had a group come up with 12 solutions. And if you remember, we had spent 2 days coming up with a program for the community and then 2 evenings coming up with alternatives. And on that evening, it took us about a half an hour to consensus on one of the 12, which thank goodness we did, because then we were off to the races, no doubt about it. I don't want to forget the Getting It Built workshop, which was also memorable with you guys, where we talked about how to get your money in, how to get your money out, the importance of the group process. I always feel like I don't care how much land you have and how much money you have. If you don't know how to work together as a group, you're high-centered. The design process, the city process. Is there any highlights from that Getting It Built that you guys remember?
Well, we had some advantage, I think, in that most of us already knew each other.
Right.
And it wasn't that we were strangers who had to get over any kind of trust issues. Carolyn and Pat and some others who did organizational work really led us.
I remember that being a smooth workshop too. I never felt like I was getting any resistance from the group. But now, true that you guys knew each other, that helped, and you had actually worked together, different roles at the Unitarian Church. But co-housing is kind of a unique process. I mean, none of these people had designed their own houses together previously. None of them had designed a site design. None of them had designed a common house. And I think those skills are somewhat unique, but you guys were great students. And that was my big takeaway. As long as people are embracing the best of the practices we have available, then we're likely to succeed.
Everybody agreed that we wanted to do this. And that was most of that original 20. Most of them ended up in the group.
Yeah.
No.
And in the beginning, it was understood that we're going to move fast and break things, I think is the slogans. We didn't break things, we built them.
Yeah, you did. There was a certain sense of not only urgency because you're growing older, but if we're going to spend our Saturday and Sunday talking about this stuff, let's just make it happen, really.
Yeah.
Yes.
We knew we were not getting any younger. If we wanted to live here, we had to get it done.
Yeah. In fact, I got to say, that's my favorite part of working with senior co-housing. There's a sense that time is running. Let's move it on. The whole green bananas thing is just so
Yeah.
real. I hear it all the time. And the intergenerational groups nowadays, they seem to not want to waste time either. So I'm so happy about that.
Well, there was another advantage. There was already another co-housing group here in Port Townsend, not
Right.
the kind that we are. Nonetheless, there was a group that had already set up a kind of community somewhat along these lines. So it wasn't a completely foreign idea.
But unfortunately, they did things like built their common house long after they moved in, and it really circumvented their culture. You guys had the common house, you supplemented your private houses right off the gate. It made it obvious and easy for you to recognize that it was okay to make our houses smaller because we had this 4,000 square foot common house. The reality is, with guest rooms and laundry and dining on occasion, quilt making, puzzle making, and all the things that happens there. You don't have to have a bigger house to make that happen. So, segueing into that design process, which was 2 days of coming up with design criteria for how far the parking was gonna be, how many parking places we were gonna do at all, and then the common house where we decided how many times a week we're gonna have dinners, which influenced the size of the common house, how many guest rooms we were gonna have it because there are people who over and over again say to me, "Why don't you just design it and we'll see if we like it?" And it's because I believe strongly that future residents have a lot to put on the table. They have a lot of values, they have a lot of wisdom, they have experiences, and therefore it will be better if the residents design it. It's not going to be as good if I design it by myself. So what did you guys find surprising about that design process?
Well, I think the fact that we were wanting to put our garages away from our homes, that we would have to walk a ways.
In fact, several of us thought it was a great idea.
Oh, yeah.
Make us all walk a
Yeah.
little more.
Yeah. And it puts us closer so that when I get up in the morning, I look across and see whether Barb's up in her kitchen and making her coffee. And when I walk out to get my mail, I'm going to see some of my neighbors. And that's really important. And even those neighbors who no longer are mobile, and we've got a couple of people who are using
Little scooters.
we meet on the pathway, that double parallel driveway down through the middle makes it possible, and the width of the sidewalks so they can get to their homes and back.
And I think we all understood that that would probably be a great idea, a great way, because one reason we like Port Townsend is there tends to be a fair amount of interaction among people around the town. And we like that.
Mhm.
That's great. Nothing like walking past your neighbors and through your neighborhood
Yeah.
to stitch the neighborhood together better.
Yeah, absolutely.
No doubt about it. And when it comes to the common house, we spent 2 days coming up with a design criteria for all the things that would make your life better, more practical, more interesting, more fun, more economical by doing it together than doing it alone.
Yeah.
What surprised you about that exercise?
Well, but the main part of the common house, the main meeting room, where lots of activities go on, with the kitchen right there, people coming in and out while they're preparing meals, is a really important piece of it.
Being able to help them. I love the fact that I made common dinner there a couple times, and Howard, he would show up around 4 o'clock and say, "What can I do to help?" And just help. And it was so
Mhm.
much fun.
Well, recognizing, for instance, that you could have guests and
Yeah.
you didn't have to have a
Have to in
guest
the
room
house.
in your own home. So they could have their privacy, you would have your privacy. And I think as we get older, we get more and more used to having that privacy. And that's important.
Yeah, the guest rooms, I think you're right. As you get older, having people stay in your house for 2 or 3 days is harder on you. I mean, it's like a workout.
Mhm.
And I noticed that those common guest rooms are often full.
Could
It
all
also enables us to have smaller units because you didn't need to plan to have a guest room or to plan to have somebody sleep in your living room. You know?
it also means that you can have more guests. You
Yeah.
can have somebody here in the house if you have the room for them, and 2, 3 more others in the guest rooms in the common house.
Which is a big boon. I mean, if you have old friends and family that are going to visit and you can accommodate them, you can regain some extended family feeling. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but for older people, having some family around is really great.
That's why we got our daughter and husband and our son to move to the area.
They could stay with you, but not with you per se.
Yes.
The house design, we would have 7 or 8 households at the table designing a house. A 2-bedroom, 1 bath, a 2-bedroom, 2 bath, and a 3-bedroom, 2 bath, I think it was. And yet You would think that would be hard on people. Some of them have actually designed their own houses previously. They're all very opinionated, which you would think would be detracting from a consensus model, but it wasn't. Basically, I really felt like in designing your houses, the 1+1 = 3 model really came through. I have an idea, you have an idea, and we were constantly improving the solution to
Yeah.
your private houses. What was your guys' impression?
Well, it worked well. Several of us had, as you mentioned, already been through the process. Carolyn and I had designed and built 3 houses. This is our 4th one. And there were several other people who had done something similar. So it wasn't entirely foreign to us.
Well, since you guys have had that experience before, as an architect, I've designed plenty of custom houses. And I always feel like that's harder on couples than designing 7 or 8 houses at the same time around the same table. What's your guys' impression of which one's easier?
You're probably right.
I mean, everybody's being diplomatic, there's no hierarchy.
The thing about several people sitting around the table designing the house, that it's not a personal question between the husband and wife about you can't have your whatever, if I can't have my something or other, because the edges are rubbed off in the group.
Yeah, exactly. Private house I designed, when we were getting to how big to make the garage, the wife said, "That's your domain, dear. You decide." And then as soon as he started speaking, she started correcting her. And then when we got to the kitchen, he said, "Dear, you decide. That's your domain." And as soon as she started speaking, he started correcting her. So, there was none of that when we were planning your houses. Zero of that kind of, transaction. Everybody's looking at, let's shine this, let's fix that.
We decided very early on that we were going to design 3 kinds of houses, the 1 bedroom, 2 bedroom, and so on. We were not going to set aside any of those houses for any particular person. We did not know which house we would be in, not even which floor plan, until very near the end of construction. When we got to the point where we had to pick carpets and things like that, we did each get a house assignment. But up to that time, all of us were in the same pot. We did have a system we used to set a priority. The people who put the most money in the earliest and had the most at stake for the longest got the first choices. But it meant that we all were in that together. We all had the same plans and interests in making the houses very nice.
Yeah, that makes sense because from the beginning, you guys realized we're in this arm in arm, and that makes a big difference because now that translates into now. In other words, you're still in it arm to arm. This is the whole life deal, the whole functional neighborhood deal.
The emphasis was very much on the community, not the individual houses.
Yeah.
I mean, the individual houses were going to be nice, but they would be nice because we were all putting it together.
Amen.
Pam came up with that line that if you join us, you're buying a community and a nice house comes with it.
It's thrown in free.
Yeah.
And if you look at the book Co-Housing Communities, which has your guys' house plans in it, they're state-of-the-art houses, co-housing or otherwise. When I walk in, I go, okay, this house is warm enough with all the exposed wood. This house is light enough with the windows and the skylights.
Everybody likes the
Oh, yeah.
Functional enough. Most importantly, you can see your neighbors walk by. You have a front porch, in my view, the most important room in the house. You can sit out there, invite people over.
I took pictures the other day. Folks in our pod were down on Jim's front porch, sort of the first of the season.
And it's so easy to do that versus going into somebody's house,
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely.
You could be walking by and just end up sitting at somebody's front porch and having bread and olives or having a cup of coffee and you didn't plan to do it,
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's what makes co-housing fun, period. It really does.
In fact, you can also have some people come by while you're pulling a weed and they help you pull a weed.
There's a little bit of Tom Sawyer goes on from time to time, isn't there? Yeah, right. For sure. I have to say that I feel like one workshop after another, reached its potential in your project. I feel like it reached its potential because you guys took the group process so seriously from the beginning. I'll never
Yeah.
forget during the Getting It Built workshop, I asked the group, who hates facilitating a group meeting? Janet Palmer raised her hand. I do. I hate facilitating a meeting. So I said, okay, Janet, come on up, facilitate the next topic. And she did. She brought an immense amount of dedication to the topic. I think the topic had to do with facilitating who was going to get into which committees, which was darn important. Who's on the design committee, who's on the landscape committee, et cetera, et cetera. And the reason I did that is because I was suggesting, as you guys might recall, that everybody try a hand at it so you could find out where the talent was. And I think everybody agreed, even though Janet hated it, at least at first, she was a pure talent.
Oh, she's very
Yeah,
good
yeah,
at it.
she's good at. She still does it.
Yeah,
She's clearly a talent.
definitely.
And so it turned out to be win-win for everybody. Totally win-win. My view, not only the design is fundamental to the lifestyle that you live there, the design is germane to maintaining the community after the honeymoon has worn off. And I feel like the number one thing that accomplishes that is the design process is the place to be silly so that later you don't have to be self-conscious. I don't have to walk 2 blocks to a neighbor to talk to only to find out they're not interested in talking to me, right? The possibility of walking down the lane, seeing somebody on their front porch, which means you're fair game, as opposed to on the back porch. I'd be reticent to talk to somebody in the back deck.
Well, in first place, it's hard to get to back porch.
Yeah.
They take the privacy seriously, which was dead clear when we designed your site plan. One of the top priorities was having as much privacy as I want and as much community as I want.
Yeah.
Right.
So many places that people had moved from, you had a choice between as much privacy as you wanted or as much privacy as you wanted. In
Yeah.
other words, not much choice unless you made a phone call, got into your calendar, and figured out who you were going to go visit.
Right.
Very self-conscious by comparison to just walking down the lane and feeling free to anybody who was not in their backyard. It's not just the architecture, as I will attest. It's also the intention around being a community that the group brings to the table. And I say that because Pat Hoonhausen moved from a very groovy little cottage neighborhood where she had a front porch and a common house. But she told me in 2 years of living in this cottage neighborhood, not one person had ever come to her front door and said hello or said anything. So the things that you guys do to maintain that sense of community over time, how would you describe them?
Well, common dinners
Yeah.
and then TGIF on Fridays. There's a group that gets together for coffee. There's a games group. We have 2 mornings a week, have exercise, Tai Chi,
Movie nights.
movie nights,
Yeah.
um,
Cribbage.
Sunday afternoons. Big TV for, there's some folks who watch football,
And some puzzles.
puzzle.
Mm.
The bench in the atrium is where you put the stuff you want to pass on before it's going to go to Goodwill. We've had something fun recently. We all found old pictures of ourselves, I mean, when we were young, and put them up without names on them in the atrium, and then tried to guess who people were. And that was a lot of fun.
That was quite popular.
Very popular.
Also surprising.
You guys sound like your softwares just find ways to have fun, which is real. I mean, there's practical things that you have to do together, and I'm sure you use the Common House for common meetings.
Oh, yeah.
Nothing like having to figure out, I'm sure some committee does this,
Yeah, we have all the, we have all the teams.
all the
that
management stuff.
do
But
things.
to tell you the truth, I hate to say it, but I find the practical reasons that we get together to solve problems seems to be a big community building and community sustaining exercise, if you will. I mean, it's an ancillary benefit. Anything you do that facilitates communication.
We're also running a business here. We were our own developers. We continue to manage the operation, and all of us are on the board. So we take it seriously. And we work together without very much friction at all. Practically everyone who comes to our monthly board meetings goes away saying, boy, that was easy. That's because we've done the homework.
And that's the number one way to grease the wheels. You've done the homework. You guys also have a state-of-the-art newsletter. I mean, I think it's one of the best in co-housing.
What do you mean one of the best?
Okay, the best.
They take that very seriously.
Yeah. Okay. Along those lines, Jack, you mentioned a minute ago that you were your own developers, and so many things fell into place on your project to make it possible. I remember 280,000 was the maximum that you pay for a house. When we knew that from the beginning because the finance committee got letters from the bank on every future resident. And I remember there being 5 people on the edge. And I bring this up because, affordability is the question of the day around America. Leveraging me into a house, period. And I say this to young people all the time, you have to get organized because you guys built houses, 11 of them for 283,000 they ended up being. Everybody got into their house and nobody was priced out.
That absolutely was really hard for us to hold that line so that people could stay. We did not lose anybody because they couldn't afford it.
Your architect, i.e. me, had no interest in losing anybody. That's the worst part of my job if that ever happens, and it almost never happens because I'm so motivated to do it. However, that said, the downside of that is now those houses are worth 3 times or twice as much as they were.
Yes.
Yes.
And we don't know what to do about that.
But I'd like to take this opportunity to advocate for future groups to make a cap on their resales. There's some groups cap it at 5% per year appreciation, or some groups like Senior Co-Housing in Abingdon, Virginia, 40% of the appreciation when you sell your house goes back to the group. They agreed to it before they moved in. That's the big deal. But their big selling point is, hey, you're not selling a house, you're selling a community. We're all part of the community. That 40% all goes to deferring people's HOA fees. And when your house is sold, they're not just buying your house, then they know they're buying a whole community, and it makes a difference to them. If you want to sustain affordability, choose to do it as you're designing the project along the way. And the other thing you guys did was developing it yourself, because every time I work with a community where the developer comes on later, the whole budget goes up by $1 million, basically. That would have priced a bunch of people out of our towns. And so I'm very impressed by how you guys held that line.
I think it was very helpful for us to have Fred Kimball,
The project manager.
who met with our construction interface team on a weekly basis. He was on site every day. He kept an eye on things. Well worth the money to have paid Fred to be part of that process. And he would come to our meetings and explain what was going on, what was coming up, so that those of us on construction interface didn't have to fumble around and try to do it. Here's the professional contractor who knows what's going on.
The project manager is such a key role because they wake up in the morning and they think about what's not being dealt with that needs to be dealt with. Of course, there's plenty of things on the horizon that are planned and known, but the reality is what ends up surprising a project is what ends up delaying a project. And the federal government hired me to come to Washington, D.C. and sit in a room for 8 hours with 150 American Indian tribes and talk about the various pieces of their efforts that were causing them to not get their reservations built, their housing built, their schools built, one thing or another. And it all came down to the project management. They had good architects, they had good designs, but they're not always as good as Fred. So, a lot of people think they can do it. And in fact, I was kind of unpopular with the American Indians because I was saying the biggest problem with their project management is the chiefs were doing it. And the chiefs are very distracted. They want to do it because they want to be in control. I was arguing, you got to get the chiefs resigned if they can't move the ball forward, make a big case, especially during the Getting It Built workshop, get a project manager. Somebody who, when their eyes open at 6:30 in the morning, what do I have to do today? Do I have to take the mayor another 10 copies that he's lost 9 times already? Or do I have to go find another framing contractor because this one's not getting the job done, one thing or another? So, and that's what seemed like Fred did. I'm so glad you raised that, Carolyn.
I would say two things. One is that it shouldn't be a member of the group who tries to be the project manager,
Yeah.
because then everything gets warped out of shape. And the other is that Fred was there every day, more or less, but nobody else was. We didn't go on the campus, as it were, for a month at a time. We got one afternoon a month to go and look and see what was going on. Otherwise, we stood outside the
Just
Peninsula.
walked along the public
Yeah.
trail looking over the fence.
Well, because every contractor worries a lot about a group client. There's
When we went to the city planning commission and we said Fred Kimball is going to be our project manager, that was what sold it. I mean, the fact that we had a well-respected local contractor made the difference, and it passed right on through. And 100 people showed up to that hearing. And there were people who were ready to complain and didn't want to see the project done. But we haven't run into problems in the neighborhoods at all.
Yeah. Usually I choreograph 4 or 5 members to make a presentation at the public hearings because they're local, among other things, and people are sympathetic to them, you know. But Fred is a unique personality, is that he might as well have been a local. He was even better than a resident.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Much
Oh,
better.
definitely was.
Among other things, there's no question that his track record was going to assure that the project was built
Yeah.
and built successfully. That made
Yeah.
a big difference. Every project I do, there's somebody in the group wants to do it. I always say, you know, you have to be ready to be fired, because if you're not moving the ball forward tomorrow, you could be fired. And that is very deleterious to your relationship
Oh,
to
yeah.
the group.
Yeah.
So,
Yep. We
Yeah.
made it clear to everybody that they were not to try to interfere with the process. Fred would take care of that.
right on. Any final words, you guys?
Well, you should try to arrange so that there's no embargo or sudden stock market dip or anything like that. It's processable. If you just take care of that,
Yeah.
we'd all be happy.
Oh gosh. Oh
We
gosh.
did have one hold up for that for a while.
And you guys transcended it. You know, the other senior co-housing that's one of my favorites for sure is in Durham, North Carolina. They had 3 hurricanes in the duration of that build out.
Hmm.
Such a big hiccup. And, you know, if you were building a private house, I think any one of those residents would have broke down crying their eyes out, you know, after one hurricane.
We've been through a few hurricanes.
And yet they had each other. There's so
Mhm.
much to be said about that, you know? That courage compounds, and their courage was buffeted by having each other, and they got done, and they got their affordable units built, basically, because they were insured. And I gotta feel like the bravery, gosh, you know, when we were building our project, Katrina happened, plywood went from $20 a sheet to $30 a sheet overnight.
Yeah.
We just had to adjust, and it was just part and parcel to all the challenges of
Yep.
life, but people managed to step up and through teamwork solve problems.
Of course, it might help if you have anybody who's ever actually designed and built their home and not just gone out and bought one, because that makes a difference.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Besides you guys, how many other people in your group had actually built a house before?
Well, we built 2.
Actually 3.
3, yeah.
Well, I've never counted that, but several.
I bet Jerry did.
Yeah.
Jerry, well,
Jerry. Oh, yeah. Jerry is building cabinetry for tiny houses for Habitat.
That's sweet. The volunteerism that occurs when you live in senior co-housing is contagious. That's great. Hey, well, you guys, I really want to thank you guys very much for being here.
Thank you.
And there's a book written about Quimper Village called State of the Art Co-Housing. I can't recommend it enough. And you can also find more information about this episode in the description, along with our website, where you can find out about books. There's very extensive discussion about Quimper Village in the book Co-Housing Communities, where the whole design process was laid out, and various courses, etc. And you can also sign up for our newsletter at cohousingco.com and their newsletter at quimpervillage.com. I want to give thanks to our production team, which is Nata Chai and Melissa. And until next time, I'm Charles Durrett, and thank you for being in the conversation.